Hello. I've gathered.
Do you want to come on in?
Sure.
Look, I thought to start with, I'll have Minister McAnulty give a quick update on the National Emergency Management response to significant weather events around the country. I'll give then a couple of statements about the local government event today and my comments, and then I thought we'd just jump into questions. So, Minister.
Oh, g'day everyone. Yes, so obviously there's been a bit of severe weather in Otago and Canterbury and up north in Bay of Plenty as well. So there's a couple of isolated communities in Canterbury and Otago, but they all have supplies and power. It's just an access issue. So they're all okay, but liaising with the local civil defence outfits. Up in Bay of Plenty, eastern Bay of Plenty, there is the likelihood that a state highway will have to be closed. It has been down to light traffic all day, but of course the rain continues and they're probably going to have to close the road. We've preemptively approved additional funding to get resources to the community that would be isolated if the road closes. That's coming from the Gisborne side, but again, civil defence agencies are dealing with that, and so it's all under control. It hasn't had to be brought up to ministerial level, but the NEM is continuing to liaise with them. And I've spoken to each of the mayors. There's about 6 mayors affected. I've spoken to all of them today, and they're pretty happy with the support they're getting.
If the road is closed, how soon do they reopen it? Is it the road being closed because it's damaged, or just because the weather makes it unusable?
Yeah, it's pretty significantly damaged, so it's essentially cut in half. So it's down to one lane at the moment, light traffic only. There is an alternative route, but it's significantly longer than what it is. So for the time being, the immediate focus is getting essential supplies to that community. That's being done through the council and at an iwi level. This part of the country that's used to having severe weather events, and they've got a pretty robust structure in place to get supplies to people. So the Mayor was confident that things will be able to kick into gear if needed pretty quickly.
And those communities in the South Island that are cut off, is there any indication that we know get access again?
Not at this stage, but we're getting regular updates. They're not too concerned. Everyone's in a safe and warm environment. They've got power, they've got food. It's just there's a group that's stuck in a hotel, for example, but they've got plenty of food because the people they were expecting to turn up couldn't. So they're sorted. It's just a case of not being able to get out at the moment. But once the weather calms down, they reckon they'll get them out pretty quick.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. We'll do a quick trade. A couple of comments on the comments I'm about to make here at the LGNZ Conference. You know, it is another opportunity to reflect on what is a busy agenda. And here, keen to continue to see central and local government partner together on everything from, of course, the Three Water Reform Programme, the resource management issues that we are working through in order to ensure that we have the housing and infrastructure we need for the future, and of course, the incredibly difficult issue of climate resilience, adaptation and mitigation. This is where it's key that central and local government keep working together. I also am going to reflect briefly on just what it means to be a public-facing official in current times. And we have recently had local government approach us with concerns over safety for those members who are seeking election or re-election over the fact that our electoral laws have previously required them to publish their home address. Now, the fact that they've seen the need to seek an alteration to the legislation, I think, does speak to the fact that it is a tough time to be a public official, and I'm keen to work with local government to make sure that we can continue to attract really good people to these important roles, and that means understanding where there are safety concerns and how we can work together to address those. It's a quick overview of just a couple of the comments I'll make today.
Prime Minister, there's a lot of businesses across the country that are really hurting right now. Is the government considering any more support schemes, for example, extending the wage subsidy?
Well, of course, you'll know that where we've had in place things like the wage subsidy, that has been where we've had restraint on trade, where we've, for instance, required gathering limits or changes to the way hospitality operates. We don't have those things in place right now, but I absolutely accept that what many businesses will be experiencing are the impacts of staff shortages. Now, here, that's where things like the isolation payment, the fact that we're covering the costs of individuals isolating at home, that is still an issue, and that payment continues. I note with interest that Australia just reinstated theirs, so I think that demonstrates it is one of the key measures that we can keep in place.
Doesn't the government need to go further? I mean, there's a lot of businesses that just can't open at all because there's no staff, the patronage is way lower because nobody really wants to go outside. Is there more the government could be doing at this stage?
And look, here we have a situation where we are in the peak of a period where we have winter illnesses. We have flu that is also affecting businesses, customers and staff. But I think the most important thing we can do at the moment is to encourage support for isolation with that payment remaining in place, making sure that people are vaccinated and up to date vaccination schedule, and of course continuing to have those obligations in those places like retail where people are using masks.
But it's a no to any additional support?
We have no plans to reinstate that in the same way that we have no plans to move into red, because we know the measures that make a difference are already in place.
Prime Minister, do you accept the responsibility and the platform you have to promote indoor mask use?
Oh, look, I think we all accept as politicians that we are role models. And look, I take that job very seriously.
Do you take it seriously enough for your 1.7 million followers on Instagram to put that post yesterday?
I think everyone will have heard by now the circumstances of that photo. Masks were on and then were asked to be removed briefly for a photo. But if I may, I from time to time actually do get asked to take my mask off for photos, and in the future I'll be more vigilant about politely declining.
You're the Prime Minister, why didn't you just tell me?
Well, of course, you can see that I was in a group photo of 120 others when we were all asked to briefly remove our masks. As I say, whilst everyone's aware of those circumstances, I will work in future to be more diligent about politely declining when that request is made.
But in the
On the safety of elected members,
Yeah.
is this just part and parcel of the job, or do these elders need to do better?
You know, I think it is not unreasonable for us all to have an expectation that no matter what our views might be on an issue, and we will in New Zealand frequently have different views, that we engage in debate and dialogue respectfully. And I think for the most part, you'll find the vast majority of New Zealanders agree with that. For whatever reason in recent times, and not just in New Zealand, but I've observed this internationally, you know, I think that there has been a change in tone in some of the debate that we see. We should keep being willing to contest ideas, to disagree with one another, but do so in a way that's respectful and ensures people feel safe.
There's a lot of misinformation still circulating online and even outside of protesters around what Three Waters is and what co-governance
Yes.
is. Is this a concern at all?
Oh, look, I think it is always important that whenever we're having a debate, that we're debating the facts. And, you know, that's on us as well to make sure that as much information is out there as possible so that we are always debating the facts. And it's our job to try and dispel disinformation where we see it arise. It is the environment we have now is perhaps a bit tougher to address that than it was before. But that won't change that duty that we have to make sure, yes, we encourage that discussion, but that people have clear in their minds what it is that's being proposed. Yeah, I'll canvass around if I can. Yeah.
Among the misinformation around Three Waters, as just mentioned, there are some genuine issues around the proposals and that policy. I mean, what are those issues that the government's facing at the moment, and what progress has been made on those issues going forward in Three Waters?
Well, progress is being made, you know, and we can see that already some of the funding, for instance, being relieved by central government as part of this transition is going into greater resourcing around water infrastructure. But I think there is common ground. One area where we absolutely all agree, except potentially bar the opposition, is that the status quo is untenable. You know, the estimates have been as high as $185 billion worth of investment required to make sure that in the future we're meeting the needs of our population, that we're able to continue to grow housing, that we can deal with the challenges of severe weather events. And the alternative to what we're proposing is to do nothing, in which case ratepayers could be faced with bills of up to $9,000 per household. The status quo is not an option, and I think that the vast majority of local government absolutely accepts that. Then it becomes a debate about what you do about it. I'll let you have a follow-up question. And then
when it comes to donation law reform as well, the public submissions are being made public by the members of the public, but party submissions are not. Now, the National Party has called on the Labour Party to make those submissions public. Will they ever be made public? When are they going to be made public? And why are they not being made public?
I'm advised that we did not make a formal written submission, so that's a simple answer to the question. But that we did meet and discuss proposed reforms and answer questions. But of course, as you can imagine, the Labour Party position is in line with the government position, which is presented within the proposals.
Prime Minister, is the government giving any thought to lessening the isolation time that somebody has to take if they test positive to COVID? I mean, 7 days is a lot higher than we've seen in other jurisdictions.
Yep.
In the UK, they don't have anything. So is there scope to bring that down?
Look, it is one of the things that we've kept under constant review, but the view of our experts is that it is one of the things that is making a significant difference in reducing potential case numbers. Because as you can imagine, reducing down the amount of time that you isolate when you have COVID, there will be some who will continue to be infectious for longer periods. And so every day that you reduce that down, you potentially lift the number of cases you might create.
So when could we be looking at that change?
And I note that in your first question you asked about the impact on business of COVID illnesses, and the second whether or not we'll reduce down the number of days people isolate. Unfortunately, doing the latter will have an impact on the former. So we do want to make sure that we're doing our bit to reduce that caseload as much as we can. We're keeping it under review, and you'll know that we keep looking at our settings all the time, and that is one of the things we keep checking in on, but I think people will agree that now is not the time.
And just very quickly on that video that we saw of the criminal punching a police officer, knocking her to the ground, horrific images. First of all, what was your reaction when you saw that? And second of all, is it time for tougher punishment for people that make these sort of actions?
Yeah. Look, obviously within the Sentencing Act, there is already within the aggravating factors, whether or not someone is in the process of performing their duties when that criminal act occurs. So that's already embedded within the Sentencing Act as an aggravating factor. But look, putting that to one side, you know that I come from a police family. My father was a policeman for 40 years. I have enormous respect for the job that our police officers do. None should have to face what we see in stories like this. It is a reality, though, that they often do face dangerous situations, and for us, we need to make sure that we have in place the kinds of support to try and reduce that down as much as possible. Having good police numbers, and of course, when the police say that there's extra things that would help keep them safe, like tactical response, and the package that we recently put in the budget, then we have those obligations.
Have you got a message for her and her family?
Just that I hope for the speediest recovery possible, and that they feel well supported. I might just finish on this side. Yeah.
When you say some of those
Giles
who are facing abuse from their constituents and are staring down the prospect of being voted out of office this year because they're not choosing to reject the three warders reforms, they're basically putting their jobs on the line here.
Well, look, ultimately, that is where I think you'll see, though, the consensus that action is required. Ultimately, I don't think equally any local government politician would want to have to face the on up by, say, up to $9,000. The status quo is not an option. If we continue with that, it will pose further challenges for ratepayers and local government down the track. But the only thing perhaps that there's less enthusiasm for investing in than water infrastructure, the only thing that perhaps there's less enthusiasm around is water reform. But we have to do something. And that is why we have chosen, instead of delaying and ignoring the problem and seeing New Zealanders potentially continue to get sick, houses not be built, and ongoing potential issues around pollution, we're choosing to act. And I know many members of local government support that.
And on the $44 million, whether it's a question for you or Minister.
Yeah.
This is obviously in response to councils saying they're stretched. It's not something you could have anticipated, particularly in those rural communities.
Well, the benefit of going down and visiting these councils is you hear from them straight face to face, and one message that they've consistently said is that whether they agree or not, there is a demand on staff, and their staff are already flat out with other things. And so if we want to do this right, we know why we're trying to do this, we need to spend money to save money. And so we're putting money into councils to give them the resources that they need to do this transition. Especially smaller rural ones simply won't have the expertise on their books already. But this funding will allow them to access that. So first tranche of funding is the final message there. We wanted to get it out as a result of the feedback that we've heard. I've met with 21 councils out of 55. I would have finished those by the end of September. But one message that each of those 21 said is that if the government can assist them with this transition period, it'll be welcome.
The 44 million is on top of 2.5 billion. The 44 million yesterday is on top of the 2.5 billion.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, yeah.
The
And then we'll just, if I can just, Pat, shall I finish up here? And I'll finish with you.
On the controversy around the photograph, do you think it should be perhaps, okay and less frowned upon for people to take their masks off for 10 seconds to get a photograph? Otherwise, we'll have years and years and years of people having photographs with masks on.
Yes, it's a good question. I think, though, that, as I've said, there's been quite a few occasions where I'm asked to take them off for the purposes of photos. I think in the future I'll just have to more often politely decline. Because, I accept the point that we are role models. We will from time to time make mistakes, but we are ultimately still role models.
So the social rules should be to wear masks and all photographs if you're a public figure?
I'm speaking here on what I will undertake to do in the future. But as I say, it has from time to time occurred. I have been asked to. And in the future, that's what I'll endeavour to be more diligent around.
Submissions on Three Waters are about to close. Are you open to, if the submissions convince the committee to perhaps recommend, more water entities, so you don't have 4 water entities or some sort of significant changes to your proposal? Are you open-minded to perhaps changing it?
Yeah, and look, this is where we've said that there's a number of issues around the finer detail that the submission process is open and available on, particularly as we go through the economic regulator and so on. But the advice on the number of entities has been quite clear. There's quite a tight ring around if we want to achieve the benefits of that economy of scale and reducing the potential burden on ratepayers, that the number of entities is a pretty important part of that. But then, of course, there are a range of issues where we've already gone to local government and said, hey, look, on governance, you've raised concerns. Please tell us what you believe will improve that. They've done that and we've implemented it. So I think I'd like to say you can see where we are genuinely trying to work openly with local government. Yeah, and we'll finish here.
Does the government have concerns about the conduct of Matthew Ducati?
If you're referring to the fact that we've had a recent appointment process, obviously that's been gone through. We have an expectation, as with any appointment process, that that's rigorous. But I do need to allow entities to go through that without the interference of politicians.
Talking more about that, the shifting of that contract, the $1 million contract from the Māori Council to his own organisation.
Again, it's not something that I'm in a position to be able to give you comment on.
It's been embellishing his past, and when it comes to a series that has been submitted to the government, exaggerating the roles he's had in the past. Is that appropriate? Again,
all I can say is that when an entity or an agency or a government organisation is looking to employ someone, I would simply expect that, as with anyone, they go through a rigorous employment process. All right, thanks everyone. Emergency management response to significant weather events around the country. I'll give then a couple of statements about the local government event today and my comments, and then I thought we'd just jump into questions. So, Minister.
G'day everyone. So obviously there's been a bit of severe weather in Otago and Canterbury, and up north in Bay of Plenty as well. So there's a couple of isolated communities in Canterbury and Otago, but they all have supplies and power. It's just an access issue. So they're all okay, but liaising with the local civil defence outfits. Up in Bay of Plenty, eastern Bay of Plenty, there is the likelihood that a state highway will have to be closed. It has been down to light traffic all day, but of course the rain continues and they're probably going to have to close the road. We've preemptively approved additional funding to get resources to the community that would be isolated if the road closes. That's coming from the Gisborne side, but again, civil defence agencies are dealing with that, and so it's all under control. It hasn't had to be brought up to ministerial level, but the NEMA is continuing to liaise with them. I've spoken to each of the mayors. There's about 6 mayors affected. I've spoken to all of them today, and they're pretty happy with the support they're getting.
If the road is closed, how soon do they reopen it? Is it the road being closed because it's damaged, or just because the weather makes it unusable? Yeah, it's pretty significantly damaged, so it's essentially cut in half. So it's down to 1 lane at the moment, light traffic only. There is an alternative route, but it's significantly longer than what it is. So for the time being, the immediate focus is getting essential supplies to that community. That's being done through the council and at an iwi level. This part of the country that's used to having severe weather events, and they've got a pretty robust structure in place to get supplies to people. So the Mayor was confident that things will be able to kick into gear if needed pretty quickly.
On those communities in the South Island, is there any indication of when they'll get access again?
Not at this stage, but we're getting regular updates. They're not too concerned. Everyone's in a safe and warm environment. They've got power, they've got food. It's just there's a group that's stuck in a hotel, for example, but they've got plenty of food because the people they were expecting to turn up couldn't. So they're sorted. It's just a case of not being able to get out at the moment. But once the weather calms down, they reckon they'll get them out pretty quick.
Thank you, Minister. We'll do a quick trade. A couple of comments on the comments I'm about to make here at the LGNZ Conference. You know, it is another opportunity to reflect on what is a busy agenda. And here, keen to continue to see central and local government partner together on everything from, of course, the 3 water reform program, the resource management issues that we are working through in order to ensure that we have the housing and infrastructure we need for the future, and of course, the incredibly difficult issue of climate resilience, adaptation and mitigation. This is where it's key that central and local government keep working together. I also am going to reflect briefly on just what it means to be a public-facing official in current times. And we have